Yesterday, Jeantel testified that Trayvon Martin used some slurs to refer to George Zimmerman. Take a listen.
I asked him how the man looked like. He looked like a creepy cracker.
Okay. Then what happened?
And then he said, still following me now. That is still following me now.
That he's still following him?
Yes.
Now, the defense jumped on that as a racial slur, but she also said he'd used the N-word, Billy. So does one cancel or balance the other? I mean, what do you take from the defense making an issue out of this?
I think the defense is really trying to attack this young lady, this teenager, and I think it will balance out. I go back and I agree with Kendall that I think that the jury is going to look at facts that make her believable, on key facts. On the issue here, the key word that I think she said she was consistent with is this creepy guy is following me. And the key elements here are not some of the other slurs that may have been used. They will be offensive, and the jury may not want to hear them. But on the key elements, was he following him? And did Trayvon Martin have a choice? I think the jury is going to be convinced that Zimmerman, based on her testimony, was in fact following her, and Trayvon Martin had no choice but to try to run, and he could not. Those are key facts, and all the other issues may come in, but on those facts, he appears to come across as believable.
Kendall, they could have possibly the mother of Trayvon Martin testify about the language these kids use, the N-word, the C-word. I mean, what happens? What is your view on this? Is it that important?
Well, I think it could be important. The prosecution doesn't really know, but the one thing they don't want this jury to believe is that it was Trayvon Martin who was using ugly language and maybe had some attitudes about somebody like George Zimmerman. And the prosecution you saw on redirect tried to get this witness, Rachel Jeantel, to talk about cultural differences, but she wasn't in a position to do that. And I think it doesn't take a lot, but if the prosecution, perhaps through Trayvon's mother, who's going to be a witness in the trial, explains it, yeah, there might be language like that, but that had nothing to do with racial attitudes. It's teenagers with all the talk they use and some of the slang they use. And it's going to be important for the mother, I think, to say something, because the one thing the defense has tried to do throughout this process is put Trayvon Martin on trial. And the judge has kept them from doing that with a lot of evidentiary rulings. And the defense is now trying to see if they can get through the side door with some of these issues to make out Trayvon Martin as being somebody who would have been the one to throw the first punch.
Billy, what happens if they put his mother on and she addresses this? And can that backfire, since not only did the term, the C word be used, but the N word be used? It's kind of hard to say that he was being racial when he used a term that is negative toward his own race as well as toward another race.
Reverend, many years ago when I was a prosecutor here in D.C., I was the chief of the D.C. homicide unit, chief prosecutor of the homicide unit, and you get all these words. This is not unusual in a homicide case to have vulgar language and activity that people feel and find uncomfortable. I think a juror and jurors look right through that and look at what are we really trying to determine. They're not trying to see if one was a good person or a bad person. There are facts here, and these facts will show who was the aggressor, who had the ability to flee, and who had the gun. I think they'll look right past these slurs and find the facts that really will help them decide this case. I don't think these slurs are going to make a difference.
Well, Kendall, at the end, there was also the back and forth about the ability of the witness to understand English because she had 3 languages she understood. Don't you think the defense gets into looking a little condescending? Like, do you understand English because you also speak Spanish and Creole?
Absolutely. Picking on her because she didn't read cursive language. There were a couple points when the defense was starting to be a little patronizing. that always backfires. And I think I like the way she stood her ground on that. She speaks 3 languages. You saw throughout some of the questioning how she would correct the defense lawyers, not rudely, but simply standing up for herself. And so whether the jury found her sympathetic or not, I think there had to be something of a grudging respect for this very young woman who was dealing with a situation that she couldn't have imagined ever encountering, who by and large stuck true to her testimony and true to her beliefs.
Billy Martin and Kendall Coffey, thank you both for your time tonight.